San Mateo County, we are recording, so whenever you want to get started, feel free.
Well, we're waiting for our leader, Christine, who introduced us. I don't know if she's having trouble. Oh, there you are, Christine.
Yeah.
Hi,
I was just saying we're waiting for you.
They just routed me.
So we were invited to get started. So I thought I'd let you take the lead since you are our leader.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for being here, Shelley. I'm definitely interested in, I think, hearing about how you've helped us create a lot of the partnerships that I described. So one of the things I think that started with Build Up is that we realized the crisis was just too big for just the ECE community to handle. So we were short, we're going to be short about 14,000 slots for childcare by 2025. So that's a tremendous shortage. It may be even more now with the pandemic. So that's where we had to do this multi-sector approach and really call on different partners to start chipping away and building more facilities, adding more facilities as we went along. So one of our really successful models was in Redwood City, was with a specific city, and Shelley was a former city council member there. But we worked really closely with the city in terms of advocating for childcare to be in their general plan. It's in one of their priorities. We've helped streamline permitting processes and waiving fees. And we also have new childcare in several developments that are being built in that city. So we've made really huge accomplishments there. And so that's just one example of connecting not only with the developers and the chambers and the community-based groups within a city, but really building the relationships with the council members and the elected officials to advocate for you and to make sure some of these things go through.
Yeah, Christine, if I could just add a couple of things to that. So first of all, it's been very, very helpful. Well, when I was elected, it was very, very helpful to have advocates who come in with the data and information that we needed to prioritize childcare. So for me personally, early childhood and childcare was one of my 3 top priorities as a council member. I served for 5 years through the end of last December. I was a school board member prior to that in a district that had prioritized. It was a K-8 district, still is. But we added pre-K as well, and so had been working on early childhood issues for quite some time, in addition to having my own kids. So I think that the combination of the council really elevating children and families as one of our top 3 priorities, so that when new developments came before us, they knew that they needed to be figuring out something. So we've actually had 3 in Redwood City that have included childcare as part of a development agreement. So that's one piece, but then a couple of the other pieces I was thinking about as I was listening to everybody talk. The other thing Redwood City did, in addition to what Christine mentioned in terms of permitting and fee waivers, is we also, when we established a rent relief fund during COVID, we set aside a certain amount for childcare providers, knowing that a lot of our home-based providers were renters and that they were going to need help to stay in their place of business and home, specifically in a different way than maybe another renter might need. And so we did set aside a pool of funds for our childcare providers, and then worked with advocates and other providers to get the word out that was available. So that's the sort of tactical pieces that we used. But I wanted to just also just take 1 second, and then I'll stop talking, because I think this is supposed to be a discussion session. That in my role as a California State Director for Council for Strong America, we organize leaders in business, law enforcement, and retired military to advocate for policies and program investments that enable kids to be healthy, well-educated, and prepared for success. And early childhood and childcare is foundational to all of the work that we do. So all of our members advocate in that realm. So I just wanted to share a couple of things that I was thinking about One is we recently released a report about women's participation in the workforce and why it is critical for us to address a childcare crisis and what businesses need to help be better contributors to that. So thinking about the theme of this around economic development, I will drop in the chat a link to that report and what businesses have said on a national level about what they need from the federal government, from state governments, and from local governments to be better partners in solving the childcare crisis. If you're in California, we'll be releasing a California-specific report in December. If you're in Pennsylvania, our Pennsylvania office released a report just a week or two ago, and all of that can be found on our website. And then we also have a fairly well-cited report about the economic impact of lack of access to childcare in the 0 to 3 range. If you've heard the 57 billion figure in terms of economic impact nationally pre-COVID to families not having access to childcare, that's a report that was our organization released in 2019 and continues to be cited by the Biden administration across the country so that people understand that this is not just the moral and right thing to do, but it is good economic policy to be investing in childcare.
Does anyone have any questions or want to add anything to the discussion? Feel free to.
Yes, this is an interactive discussion, so feel free to take your cameras off and chime in.
This is Angie from Low Income Investment Fund, and I just wanted to say that we have loved the model of Build Up San Mateo County so much that we named a statewide initiative after Build Up San Mateo called Build Up California. And two of the things that I really like is first, how thoughtful they've been in including partners, faith-based organizations, and then also how they have spotlighted different developments. In fact, I was just showing some other members of my staff a case study that they had done for a developer on a development that was co-located with housing and childcare, where they had done a really great way of just summarizing what that looked like and what the kinds of, I guess, concessions and incentives that you need to include to make sure that an operator can successfully operate in a high cost area. And I encourage you all to sign up for their newsletter and get information that can really be, I think, in many ways transferable to your counties when you're thinking about how to spur the supply of childcare.
Yeah, and Angie, I would just note that one of the chairs of the advisory committee that Christine mentioned is one of our county supervisors. So he's been a leader on that and has really helped spur county investment in a whole variety of ways that Build Up has led around facilities, but also in other areas as well, especially during the pandemic, being able to raise specific funds, again, for providers to be able to stay in business, and then also for families to be able to afford to send their kids to childcare.
And just on that point, I mean, since we are meeting with all of these counties, it's extremely important to have that county buy-in, to have a leader on your board of supervisors, or to know which leaders are all on different city councils. You know, we have a board of supervisors who chairs our committee, which is wonderful. So during the pandemic, we were able to go directly to someone and say, you know what, childcare is falling through the cracks. They don't function like a normal small business, like a typical small business. They weren't qualifying for any of the grants or funding. So we were able to put together a child relief fund that was very specific to childcare. And we were able to give out 309 operating grants. That was about $7.5 million that we got out. So having that buy-in, having that support is so important. And just having county leadership recognize that childcare is critical infrastructure to everything we do within the county is really important. So hoping you all have those relationships or can start building them.
Hi, Christine. This is Rocio Luna. I'm actually in Santa Clara County. I'm a deputy county executive here. Really interested to hear about the partnerships in San Mateo. because we have obviously very many of the same problems with real estate. And so I'm really interested to hear a little bit more from both you and your colleague around how you've engaged the county, the county elected officials in this space, because I think that clearly we have a shared responsibility with our cities to really address this really important issue, and it's definitely really key to our recovery in our area. But I think what I heard, I think your colleague note earlier, is around the data, and I think that we've struggled a little bit to make the case for how you take, because the numbers are evolving constantly. So it was really great to hear to see the link earlier with the county spotlight on what the potential or estimate gaps are now and possibly into the future, but how you translate that into dollars and cents, and then make the argument for what should the county's investment be, is really where I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how you have sort of navigated, that part of the process, even though you mentioned that you do have a champion on the Board of Supervisors, which is always great. And I think we also have the same, but how we take an actual concept and operationalize it through how do we get moving, would be really interesting for me to hear from you both.
Sure. And I think one of the things that started Build Up was because there was a very thorough needs assessment that was done. So the data was there that we had a huge shortage. The county at one point had to give back $1 million because we didn't have enough facilities to, add subsidized slots to. We had the information of what it costs to build, each space for a child. I think it was $41,000 per space. And with our shortage, we were estimating, I think, $400 million, which is why we had to be creative and find ways to reuse space and repurpose space. But the data is key. And I don't know if your county office of ed or if anyone is going to do some sort of study, but I think having the needs assessment, the childcare needs assessment, and also an economic needs assessment that tied into childcare and early learning was really key. And I think people understand it more now, especially since the pandemic, when they're seeing how it's connected to so many people. Not only is it keeping women from the workforce and families returning to work, but childcare is a workforce in itself. And, it's mainly women of color and immigrant communities that need our support, who are sort of subsidizing all of our working families. So any kind of studies, and I think there are a lot of reports that you can get for California and different things like that you can kind of show, but just to state the case that there's numbers to back everything.
Yeah, and I'll just add on. First of all, Rocio, you do have Susan Ellenberg as one of your major champions,
That's
right?
That's right. Yes, I was thinking of her, I was channeling her while you were talking.
Yeah.
She's definitely our champion, and really is uniquely focused on this area. And we really want to move on that and leverage her focus here. So yes,
yeah. And so I'll just tell you, I've sent her a few things, but I think there are some. What launched us in Redwood City was actually a report that was presented to us on the child care desert numbers, which are fairly accessible. If you haven't looked at those already, they're pretty available. And there are some tools that are calculating. I think we saw one earlier, the economic impacts of lack of access to childcare, that will help you drill down. I can tell you the study we did in California for the whole state showed that the 0 to 3 lack of access number was $9.1 billion in terms of lost wages, business, and tax revenue. So you could do a rough estimate for Santa Clara County, just taking the percentage of the population that's in Santa Clara County and calculating it out. That might be a starting point for you to do. And I'll drop my email in the chat, and you should feel free to follow up with me if I can be helpful in any way as you think about the economic analysis piece as well.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
We have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to add a couple of thoughts about rural counties before we get jumped back into the larger group. So we've been operating a rural specific program that is community engagement process. And I think it's important to think comprehensively and holistically about who can be at the table to talk about childcare. And that includes county employees, elected officials, administrators on multiple levels, particularly if family childcare or childcare centers have any licensing responsibility at a county level, thinking about how you can interact innovatively with the system infrastructure and really position. I think what you're hearing from the San Mateo folks is to position childcare as an economic development and a community development issue. It is no longer a child issue or family issue, but really putting it squarely in the laps of folks who can think about it as a community development initiative. And thinking about space and needs assessments are, of course, an important factor. I want to just toss out the idea that, oh, we're giving more time, yay, that you can think about innovative ways to finance childcare, both in kind and with financing mechanisms. Counties have the ability to bond projects, and that, of course, is an important and innovative strategy, as well as thinking about housing funds, like you talked about, creating incentive funds, generating millages or revenue that they can then disperse in unique ways, and to think about economic development, whether it is an agency or a group inside of the county that can hold on to those funds and disperse them to incentivize new childcare or the expansion of slots in existing childcare businesses. And then finally, I just want to make one point. As Nicole Barcliffe walked through all of those really great investments for childcare businesses, when they come into the childcare development block grants, CCDBG, there are restrictions about what those funds can be used for. And they are very heavily focused on restrictions around major construction or major renovations are not allowable. And that's where counties can really think innovatively around their ARPA funds. You have more flexibility than states, tribes, and territories do. Well, actually, tribes have the most, but states and territories can't fund some of those facility projects if they take, any load-bearing wall down or increase the footprint. They can't utilize their funds to do that. And so those county ARPA dollars really can be leveraged for facility work in new and different ways. And so I'll just throw those out as some ideas to think about supply building and then open it up for questions and conversation.
Absolutely agree with you. The counties have so much flexibility with the ARPA funds as they did with the CARES funds. So this is the time to try to be innovative and see what we can do. I'm curious if there's other people on the call who are working directly with their counties or are from the county.
Or even if you have questions for our speakers, feel free to chime in.
Or share with us what you're thinking about or working on, because I think we can all learn from each other.
My name's Deborah Music. I'm with Partnership for Children in Central North Carolina, part of the Smart Start Network in our state. And as a small rural county, what we're struggling with, again, like you said, we were already a childcare desert pre-pandemic. Now we're looking at a childcare moonscape pretty much and trying to figure out how we're going to replace, in particular, family care homes that closed during pandemic and that we don't anticipate are going to reopen. And so one of the struggles that we're having, our state's done a really incredible job with lots of the COVID monies to support the centers and programs that have stayed open and continue to be open, but we need help with startup. We need help with launching new businesses and helping not just the pipeline of workers, but in general, small business startup. And that was one of the things I came to this webinar hoping to learn some ideas in that area.
Deborah, that's a great question. And it's something that is very specific to rural, is that family childcare, home-based businesses are incredibly important to the delivery mechanism of childcare in a rural place. So I think there's lots of ways that you can tackle that. Number one, you really need to gather more people around the table who are not the early childhood folks. Think about those city, county administrators, local CEOs, pull different folks together to talk about how childcare is impacting the health and vibrancy of your community, how important it is to the economic recovery, and talk about what the barriers are to those childcare businesses getting launched. Is home ownership an issue? And is there a way that the county can direct funds there to be able to create some pathways there? Can you license family childcare in non-residential spaces? And if that's an option, how can you think about that? If you have empty homes or you have underutilized homes that might not be owned by a person, but by an entity like a hospital, by faith communities, those are some ways to sort of think creatively about spaces and then create financial incentives that ease the burden of new entrepreneurs coming into the field. Think about ways that you can stabilize their business operations through launch and maybe for the first year or two of operation. I think we're going to get pulled out of here in a second, but hopefully that helps to get you started.